Hello students, welcome to the channel. In this video, we will discuss the second reading passage from the December 2019 ACT Form C03. So let's begin. This is a paired social science passage. Passage A is adapted from the article Our Vanishing Light by Verlin Klinkenborg. Passage B is adapted from the book The End of Night, Searching for Natural Darkness in an Age of Artificial Light by Paul Bogard. Passage A. For most of human history, the phrase light pollution would have made no sense. Imagine walking towards London on a moonlit night around 1800, when it was Earth's most populous city. Nearly 1 million people lived there, making do, as they always had, with candles and rushlights and torches and lanterns. Only a few houses were lit by gas, and there would be no public gas lights in the streets or squares for another 7 years. From a few miles away, you could have been as likely to smell London as to see its dim, collective glow. Now, most of humanity lives under intersecting domes of reflected, refracted light, of scattering rays from overlit cities and suburbs, from light-flooded highways and factories. Nearly all of nighttime Europe is a nebula of light, as is most of the US and all of Japan. In the South Atlantic, the glow from a single fishing fleet, squid fishermen luring their prey with metal halide lamps, can be seen from space, burning brighter, in fact, than Buenos Aires or Rio de Janeiro. So the first passage starts with two sort of contrasting paragraphs that talk about how artificial light has taken over the world, right? It talks about the London of 1800, which was still largely lit by candles and rushlights and torches. And there was no massive lighting, artificial lighting at the time. But only 200 years later, you see the entire world covered under artificial light. In most cities, the sky looks as though it has been emptied of stars, leaving behind a vacant haze that mirrors our fear of the dark. We have grown so used to this pervasive orange haze that the original glory of an unlit night, dark enough for the planet Venus to throw shadows on Earth, is wholly beyond our experience. And yet, above the city's pale ceiling lies the rest of the universe, utterly undiminished by the light we waste, a bright shoal of stars and planets and galaxies shining in seemingly infinite darkness. We have lit up the night as if it were an unoccupied country when nothing could be further from the truth. Among mammals alone, the number of nocturnal species is astonishing. Light is a powerful biological force, and on many species it acts as a magnet, a process being studied by researchers such as Travis Longcore and Catherine Rich. The effect is so powerful that scientists speak of songbirds and seabirds being captured by searchlights on land or by the light from gas flares on marine oil platforms, circling and circling in the thousands. So the last two paragraphs of the passage also focus on the sort of negative consequences of artificial light. The third paragraph speaks about how our how our nights have become starless, right? We are not able to see the rich glory of stars because of this artificial patina of light. And the last paragraph talks about how artificial light can have negative consequences for fauna, for animals, right? Because it's a powerful biological magnet, light is, it tends to attract animals regardless of whether it's natural or artificial, and that can have problems. Okay, questions 11 to 13, the main idea of the first paragraph of passage A. So the first paragraph of passage A is to kind of introduce the main theme of the passage by speaking of London 200 years ago. Before electricity, it was difficult to travel to London at night. Gaslighting existed long before it was widely used. Light pollution is a relatively recent phenomenon in human history. Because of its large population, London has had light pollution for centuries. So this is C, right? Light pollution is a relatively recent phenomenon because even just 200 years ago, London did not have artificial lighting. Question 12. In the third paragraph of passage A, lines 21 to 30, the author makes a contrast between the hazy night sky over cities today and the bright stars and planets that exist above it, gray night sky over cities and the various colors of the stars, brightness of the planet Venus on an unlit night and the comparative dimness of the stars, appreciation that people once had for stars and the apathy that is pervasive today. So I think it's the first answer because you can see that he makes a contrast between the vacant haze that mirrors our fear of the dark. And we have grown so used to this pervasive haze that the original glory of an unlit night is wholly beyond our experience. So he makes a contrast between the haze that we experience today due to light pollution and the original brightness of the unlit sky, right? So that's option F. It can reasonably be inferred from passage A that an animal captured by light is most nearly one that. So here you can see that the author speaks of songbirds and seabirds being captured by searchlights and by the light from gas flares, which is to say that they are attracted to this light and they come to circle it. Has lost the ability to search for food in dark areas. It is irresistibly drawn to artificial light at night, is confined to limited dark areas at night, has lost its natural habitat to urban expansion. So it's B, right? The animal is drawn to artificial light. Okay, passage B by Bogart. Unless Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night from 1889 is traveling as part of an exhibition, it hangs at home on its wall at the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in Manhattan as 50 million people pass by every year. On a Saturday morning, I stand near Van Gogh's scene of stars and moon and sleeping town, talking with its guardian for the day, Joseph, as he repeats, no flash, 2 feet away, and too close, again and again as people from around the world crowd near. What's the appeal of this painting, I ask? It's beautiful, he says. What more can you say than that? You could rightly leave it at that, but I love the story this painting tells of a small dark town, a few yellow-orange gaslights and house windows, under a giant swirling and waving blue-green sky. This is a painting of our world from before night had been pushed back to the forest and the seas, from back when sleepy towns slept without streetlights. People are too quick, I think, to imagine the story of this painting, and especially the sky is simply that of a werewolf of energy, as Joachim Pissarro, curator at the MoMA exhibition, Van Gogh and the Colors of the Night, would tell me. While Van Gogh certainly had his troubles, this painting looks as it does in part because it's of a time that no longer exists, a time when the night sky would have looked a lot more like this. Does Van Gogh use his imagination? Of course, but this is an imagined sky inspired by a real sky of a kind few of the 50 million MoMA visitors have ever seen. It's an imagined sky inspired by the real sky over a town much darker than the towns we live in today. So a painting of a night imagined, sure, but unreal. So this passage has a more personal take compared to the first passage, right? It talks about the author, Bogart, visiting MoMA for an exhibition of Van Gogh's paintings and specifically being drawn to the Starry Night, which, if you've seen the painting, is, there are these waves of clouds and this wavy sky, this dark, utterly charming, utterly attractive dark sky in the painting. And what you see there is something that the author says is a cause, or rather is an effect of the real night sky at the time Van Gogh painted it. He does mention that he brings up the curator, Pissarro, to say that a werewolf of energy refers to Van Gogh, right? So he says that it was Van Gogh's idea to paint that. But Bogart feels that, yes, it is imagined, but it is also inspired by something real. And you could see that kind of darkness, that kind of complete, utter darkness during the time Van Gogh painted. But unreal in our age, yes. But Van Gogh lived in a time before electric light. In a letter from the summer of 1888, he described what he had seen while walking a southern French beach. The deep blue sky was flecked with clouds of a blue deeper than the fundamental blue of intense cobalt, and others of a clearer blue, like the blue whiteness of the Milky Way. In the blue depth, the stars were sparkling, greenish, yellow, white, pink, more brilliant, more sparkling, gem-like than at home, even in Paris. Opals, you might call them emeralds, lapis lazuli, rubies, sapphires. It's remarkable to modernize, first of all, that Van Gogh would reference the stars over Paris. No one has seen a sky remotely close to this over Paris for at least 50 years. But stars of different colors, it's true. So the last couple of lines from 75 onwards, Bogart provides evidence of why he thinks that Van Gogh was inspired by a real sky, when he painted. And that particularly comes out through this letter that he wrote, in which he described the blueness of the sky with these varied images, these varied terms, talking about jewels, talking about precious stones, and also specifically to refer to the sky over Paris, right, which is something that modern Parisians would have no idea about, because due to light pollution, you can't see that. So in terms of the two passages, both of them kind of speak about the same thing. They kind of speak about, they express regret at having lost that utter darkness that you could experience before the rise of electricity. But their approaches are very different. The first one takes a more academic approach and speaks of animals, speaks of astronomy, etc. While the second one takes a more personal approach and focuses largely on art, on how Van Gogh painted his Starry Night. So questions 14 to 17, compared to what Joseph appreciates about the Starry Night, the author of passage B is more appreciative of the painting's vivid colors, beauty of the painting, story the painting tells, technique used in the painting. So I think, I think it comes from here. You could rightly leave it at that, leave it at what Joseph said, but I love the story this painting tells. So Bogart is more enthralled by the story of the painting. The main purpose of the first paragraph of passage B is to introduce the passage by. So the first paragraph is the part where he visits MoMA and he kind of, looks at the Starry Night. To introduce the passage by describing the Starry Night and providing an idea of the painting's popularity, conveying the passage author's excitement when he first saw the Starry Night, showing examples of people's expectations about the Starry Night and their reactions to it, establishing when and why Van Gogh painted the Starry Night. So if you look at the first passage, it's kind of, talking about, 50 million people come to MoMA every year, and it speaks of, how, Joseph wants audience to be careful, and then that kind of establishes the context for this. So the main purpose of the first paragraph is to, I don't think he describes the painting. It doesn't convey the author's excitement, so B is out. I think C could work. 1 second, because it does talk about, it does talk about how other people react to it, right? What is the appeal of the painting, Bogart? So I think C could work. It doesn't talk about establishing why and when Van Gogh painted it. No, it doesn't give examples of people's expectations. I think I'll go with A, because it does describe the Starry Night and gives an idea of its popularity, right? The description comes here. Van Gogh's scene of stars in Moon and Sleeping Town, right? So based on passage B, which of the following statements best summarizes the passage author's point about Van Gogh's use of imagination while painting the Starry Night? Van Gogh had to rely heavily on his imagination because he usually painted during the daytime. Van Gogh's work is almost entirely imagined because the painting stars have colors that are unlike actual stars. Van Gogh used his imagination in part, but his painting was also inspired by the real night sky he observed. Van Gogh barely used his imagination at all. He tried to depict the vivid night sky exactly as it was. So it's edge, right? This is one of the main themes of the passage, that um, uh, it's, of course, does Van Gogh use his imagination? Of course, but this is an imagined sky inspired by a real sky of a kind few of the 50 million MoMA visitors have ever seen, right? So it was inspired by the real sky. Yeah. As used in line 90, the phrase remotely close to most nearly means. So no one has seen a sky remotely close to this over Paris, right? So no one has even seen a sky as close to what Van Gogh saw, right? Which was basically a sky when Paris was mostly dark. It was not lit by artificial lighting. So anything like remotely close to is, no one has seen a sky anything like this over Paris, right? It's not about location, it's not about nearby or adjacent, right? So it's B. Okay, which of the following statements best captures the main difference in the information presented in the two passages? Passage A summarizes the process by which light at night became common, whereas passage B explores one person's reaction to Van Gogh's The Starry Night. Passage A offers suggestions for restoring darkness to today's night, whereas Passage B compares the night skies of several Van Gogh paintings. So we know this is not correct because it only talks about the starry night. Passage A discusses the problems of today's bright night sky, whereas Passage B explains how people in Van Gogh's time used light at night. Passage A gives an overview of the issue of light at night, whereas Passage B examines the matter of light at night through a discussion of Van Gogh's The Starry Night. So J, I think, is a good answer, right? Because if you look at the first passage, it does present an overview. It's not focused on just one aspect, right? It talks about effect on animals, effect on astronomy, and effect on viewing the night sky. It talks about, how London and other metropolises have changed due to artificial light. Yes, and B, passage B is entirely focused on Van Gogh. So I like this. Yeah, so I don't think the first passage summarizes the process, right? It talks about how light expanded, artificial light expanded, but there was no process described for that. So J is better. One similarity between the passages is that in order to make a point about light at night, both authors discuss how dark large cities once were, the opinions of researchers, well-known works of art, personal memories. So it's A, right? Because both authors, right? The first person speaks of London, Bogart speaks of Paris. So they do talk about how dark large cities were once. Compared to passage B, passage A offers more information about the effects lighting up the night sky can have on animals, colorful appearances stars had prior to electric lights, interaction between nature and the imagination, places where night's original darkness remains. So it's F, right? The first passage categorically speaks about animals and how they get affected by artificial lighting. Okay, so that was the passage. Let's grade it. So this is questions 11 to 20, CFBHA, CFBHA, okay, HBJAF, HBJAF. Okay, great. So we got all correct. Hope this exercise was useful. In paired passages, remember that do the questions in accordance with the passage. So read passage 1, do questions of passage 1, and then read passage 2, do questions of passage 2, and finally do the relationship questions. Don't skim the passages. I don't think you can answer these questions if you skim, because you need to really understand what the authors are saying. So if you have read the passage carefully, you won't take much time answering because the questions and the options themselves are straightforward. Let me know in the comment section what other videos you'd like me to upload. I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.